All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We will get started here in just one moment. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for the Converged Community Hour. This is our second community hour of 2021, where we are hosting them at a new time at 12 Eastern, and they will be held each month. If you missed any of the past few community hours, they can be found on our website on the resources page. So I definitely encourage you to go check those out if you are unfamiliar. If this is your first time joining us for a Converged Community Hour, welcome. These were started to virtually connect user group members and discuss a variety of topics based on your interests. So if there's anything that you would like to see discussed in any upcoming community hour, please make sure to reach out and let our team know. In case you are not familiar with Converged and this is your first time joining us, welcome as well. We are a customer-led community connecting members, exploring Dell converged and hyper-converged solutions to share ideas, best practices, and experiences. For today's webcast, please use the Q&A function for any questions that you may have or the chat function for any discussion with your peers. Our speakers will respond to your questions during or at the end of today's discussion. Something else that we will be launching are 3 different polls during the webcast today, so please make sure you participate in those as they will help guide the discussion today. And as mentioned, we would greatly appreciate any of your feedback. So at the end of the webcast today, we will also be providing a short survey. And if you complete that, you will be entered to win a great prize. And with that, I will go ahead and pass along to David.
Thanks, Hollis, and thank you everybody for joining us again for another fantastic community hour panel. Can I get a thumbs up? Make sure that everybody can hear me good. All right, fantastic. And we're getting JT back in the seat. Welcome again. We have a fantastic conversation for you. Thank you for taking the time. My name is David Giesica. I'm with the Converged User Group. My co-host for the community hours, back from assignment, Jonathan Toulon, JT. Good to see you again, JT. Jonathan is a global infrastructure COE leader, Mohawk Industries, and more importantly for me, the president of the Converged User Group. Joining us today, we have some fantastic special guests. I'd like to introduce Adam Lyon, IT Operations Director at Lincoln Investment, and a new Converged User Group Board of Directors member. Adam, thanks for joining us, and that vest looks smart on you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back, Vice President, CI and HCI Product Management, Dell Technologies. It's great to see you again, Chad. This is it's always great to have you on, and you are a fantastic supporter of the Converged User Group. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate the opportunity to get some direct conversation with the members and you. So thank you, folks. Before we get started, it's great to have you. Before we get started, a couple of things. One, Hollis mentioned interactive. We'd love it to be as interactive as possible. So please use the chat function, use the Q&A function. If you want to engage in the conversation, we are here to provide you access to fellow customer members and experts like Chad. So please take advantage of that. I think also, as Hollis mentioned, we have polling that we've introduced this year. It was pretty cool back in January. We're going to keep up with it. We don't want to over poll you guys, so we've got 3 for this time. We'd love to start by finding out a little bit about our audience. So there we go. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Hollis. We've got a question up here. So let us know what CI and HCI you have or what you're thinking about, and we'll take a look at that. So while that poll's open, Chad, and since you just took a drink, that's great. I'll let you swallow. We'd love it if you can set the stage. So in a little bit, we'll talk about tell us about the CI and HCI trends and some things that you're looking forward as you drive product management for this year, please.
Yep.
And Adam and JT join in the conversation. So yeah, let's see here. What do we have? How much longer are we with the poll here, Hollis? We almost ready?
We have 20 people that have responded, so I can,
right.
I can end it whenever needed.
We'll give it a couple more, folks. And Chad, go ahead. What do we got coming down the road?
Well, I'll talk to you about some of the technology and market trends that we're seeing, and I think largely these are applying both to the converged infrastructure portfolio as well as the hyper-converged infrastructure portfolio. And really, four big things are the talk of the market this year. One is choice around consumption, right? How do I consume IT infrastructure? And you see that we've announced Apex, and Dell Technologies World will be all about Apex and the offers that are going to be there. Hybrid and multi-cloud acceleration, getting that consistent infrastructure operations experience. Almost every large customer that I talk to, and many medium and small customers, have a public cloud component to their overall strategy. In fact, many of them will have sort of a champion challenger arrangement with multiple public cloud vendors to keep them honest in pricing, but also be able to place the workload where it makes the most sense from a performance, cost, availability perspective, still with an on-premises capability as well. So, we've said for many years it's going to be a multi-cloud world, it's going to be a hybrid cloud world. I think that that's the case now. Growth at the edge. Edge is getting to be a pretty overloaded term. That's not going to change anytime soon. You're probably going to be sick of hearing about it if you aren't already. But really what's driving that in the market is this inversion of where data sits. Today, the vast majority of the data sits in the data center. 5 years out, that's probably not the case, right? You're going to see more and more of that data be collected, analyzed at the edge, have those insights brought back to the data center, but get rid of the original data. So that means pushing more and more compute out to those edges, doing AI, ML out at those locations. So you're going to first start to see this in manufacturing sorts of use cases, OT applications, retail. We'll see a lot of adoption there as well. And these are all going to be sort of different form factor, different kinds of workloads that are operating. So don't expect to see a single edge play from any one company. You're going to see multiple edge plays. Then the adoption of cloud native. As we look at more and more of those workloads, particularly at the edge, where we're going to see this growth, if you're building a new application from the ground up to take advantage of edge use cases, there's a very good chance that you're not going to write that as something that's going to run in a VM. It's probably going to be native, be cloud native, and have the ability to run on those edge nodes in your data center or up in the cloud, and you really don't care which. So HCI, I think, will play a key role in that, mostly because of the form factor that can be achieved to go out to those edge locations. So that's something that we expect. Areas that we're investing in servicing these, VDI has become, given the situation of everybody being at home, a larger part of our overall business. So we continue to innovate there with VMware and others, especially around the GPU portfolio that we bring to bear in the platforms. That and new data services. Those data services could be services that are delivered on SmartNICs, on GPUs with AI ML, but you start to see more and more of these data services or these platforms become data service rich. AI and ML I talked about. You want to be able to process that data far out at the edge and then bring the insights back, not necessarily the data itself. SmartNICs. SmartNICs will play a key role in many different facets of our technology, both converged and hyper-converged. Initially, you'll see SmartNICs start to be used for offloading things, acceleration of encryption, of TCP/IP offload, of storage traffic, for instance, or even software-defined networking functions moved on to SmartNICs, freeing up CPU cycles on your x86 complex. But the next phase of that, it gets extra interesting when you start to look at SmartNICs being the management component of an x86 server, right? So you can effectively air gap the x86 complex from the management entity and do host management from there. I think that's got a lot of potential to disrupt and enhance the x86 business and give us a lot more flexibility in how we manage bare metal or cloud native workloads. NVMe, we're starting to see this technology take off more in arrays because they're purpose built to leverage NVMe. In the case of VxRail, we have NVMe drives already. Not a huge portion of our business. I think that will change, and I think it will. I think it'll be the majority of the business in 2 years, would be my estimation. Reason being, if you look at the next vSAN releases from VMware between Update 1 and 7.0 Update 2, they're starting to now leverage more and more of the NVMe capabilities, and we will see performance increases on the order of 30 to 50%. So meaningful. Zero touch provisioning and APIs are key. Everybody agrees that the infrastructure needs to be programmable. So you'll see us invest more and more into APIs so that you can effectively have infrastructure as code and interface with the rest of a very complex environment that you have. And that also requires enhanced serviceability. So those are the key areas that we're investing across the portfolio. I think if I were in your place, and I talked to an analyst about this last week, if I go back, 4 or 5 years, when I looked to build a private cloud, there were options, between different vendors and different brands, but many of the components were sort of consistent. A CMP and some level of automation. But now, if you look to build an on-premises cloud, a private cloud, or a hybrid cloud, you sort of got this paradox of choice, because not only are you choosing what percentage of it will be cloud native versus traditional, how much it will be in the public cloud versus on your premises. What are your data governance policies around that? And if that wasn't enough, how are you going to consume it? Are you going to operate it, or are you going to have someone else operate it? Are you going to buy the gear? Are you going to lease the gear? What does that really look like? So I think there are a lot of choices that will make your world more interesting as we move forward. And I think a lot of it is going to be dictated by the workloads, the emerging workloads, and the amount of legacy workloads that you have. So those are really the key areas that we're looking at over the course of this year in the CI and the HCI portfolio, inclusive of VxRail, inclusive of Azure, and inclusive of XC.
Okay, Chad, so I have a few questions. Obviously, welcome back. Always great to talk to you. My first question is, how are you working with customers on letting them know, or I guess advising them on when they pick HCI and CI? Because HCI has become a big part of the conversation, and everybody believes that they can just run to HCI. But what they don't realize is the true value in HCI comes from modernizing your application, right? So I'm assuming that when you're talking to these customers, you're encouraging them that they should think about modernizing applications as they transition to HCI and or cloud, and how you connect the two.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And something that you all are very familiar with is, once you've sort of built your operational model around the CI experience, and vBlock and VxBlock have been clearly led the market in that experience, you realize the benefits that you get from CI, because you've adopted that operating model. If you want to stay on that operating model, and that's what you're comfortable with, then it makes sense to stay on CI and sort of modernize that CI. We'll talk about some of those refresh options that are out there with VxBlock 1000. If you're looking to move to a different operating model, that's when you look at HCI and say, does that really fit the needs going forward? Now, factors that are going to drive that is what percentage of the workload do you think is going to be cloud native? Okay. If you see that growing or you don't know, HCI can be a good solution because you could have a separate cloud native environment, or you could mix traditional and cloud native on the same infrastructure with VMware Tanzu. I think that's going to be critical. Are there dependencies on the data services that are included with the array? Would be another factor. There's still areas where HCI is not a good answer on its own. Big pools of unstructured data, not the greatest use case for HCI, right? You need some deep unstructured data storage. So it really depends on when you want to make that move. The other thing that you need to think about is look at the overall cost to operate the environment and what you're willing to do from an automation perspective. Out of the box, both solutions can be highly automated. HCI was sort of born to be automated, but to really work it into your operating environment, you're probably going to automate a lot of other things. You probably got Ansible or Terraform or other in your environment. And I think that's where the APIs start to pay off. So, if you're looking to change your operating model, if you're looking to changing workloads of traditional to cloud native, that's probably when you're going to look at HCI. If you want to continue and leverage the rich data services in our arrays and like the operating model of HCI, then you look to continue to move forward with a VX Block 1000.
And Chad, this is actually a area that's very near and dear to both me and Lincoln at the moment here. So taking a look at these poll results here, I mean, it looks like, Rail and Block pretty neck and neck as far as, what people have in here and what they're considering using. Lincoln has historically been a Block customer for the last 4 years on 740. And we're at a spot right now where we're facing a massive hardware refresh in the next year. So, CI and Block has done us very well for the last 4 years, both in terms of performance, uptime. It's just been amazing. But, when you talk about some of these legacy applications and other needs, that could be factors why people don't go to HCI or could be limiting. So that's actually something that, as I'm hearing you talk about these use cases, Lincoln's kind of at this crossroads right now. We've been building out our private cloud, but now we're looking at how can we get out into an actual true hybrid cloud state. We don't have anything containerized right now, but this is a big decision for us and where we could stand to go. The other big issue that we have, and I'm sure we're not alone here, that could come into effect here is that we're also still a very heavy iSeries shop. One of the big benefits that we had back in 2016 when we moved to Block was we were able to consolidate our iSeries storage down onto the VMAX, which has been amazing. So that's just something else. How does that fit into the CI HCI refresh journey? Because you had mentioned running in a hybrid, certain workloads on HCI, some on CI. So if you could maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're, just as you say, you're going to find certain workloads and certain features, particularly around the arrays, that you don't want to give up on. And there may not be one-for-one functionality as you move to HCI, even though it continues to evolve. So that is a case where you would look to stay on some level of VX Block 1000 refresh. It might not be as large of an environment as it is. You may experiment with HCI. Maybe a good use case there. Experimenting with HCI tends to be pretty easy. I mean, it's not a large financial commitment to get some in the house and then start to put workload on it and see how it performs with some of those applications. And that's why, if you look at the origin of HCI, everybody talked about VDI, and they still do. I kind of get tired of hearing, HCI is the VDI is the workload for HCI. Well, yeah, it was, but it's maybe 25% of the business today. But why was that? Well, you could start pretty small in a pilot project and you could quickly grow it out because you had scale out capability. And then once you got comfortable running VDI on it, you would start to run other workloads on it as well. And I think you can see the same sort of thing here. only that workload doesn't need to be necessarily VDI. There are a lot of workloads that can be satisfied with HCI. But I think if you look, and I'll pull up one more graphic here if I can, at the way that you could go about that refresh, I think there's opportunity there as well. So it's not really, it can be fairly cost effective to do a refresh onto VxBlock. So if you look at the example here where we've got a 350 and migrating to a VxBlock 1000, there are definitely some new things that you're going to want to take advantage of over here, right? You're going to want to take advantage of potentially the vSAN-based AMP and the new platforms there, new networking, maybe new servers, maybe not. But there's a fair amount of things that you're going to be able to carry forward into that refreshed VxBlock, right? So you're happy with the Unity storage, with PowerPath, with the MDS, with some of the Blade servers. No reason you can't continue to use those, and you simply modernize components as you would like to. You could also use the opportunity to move into PowerStore, which is really where we're putting all the emphasis for mid-range storage today. So you sort of follow that methodology. You can look, and I'll go right down to the bottom line. That could be potentially 50% savings over buying a net new system. So that's a nice way to pick up some of the advantages of some of the newer components without having to do effectively a forklift upgrade. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's fantastic, Chad. Thank you. It's good to know we have a couple optional paths to go through, kind of start mixing and matching and getting into the world. That's great. Thank you.
And while you're talking there, Chad, it was a great time to put up the second polling. We asked about refresh. I think Hollis just put the results up now. So it looks like about a quarter of the folks attending are looking to refresh in the next 12 months, and not much further out from that. So we also have a question then for those folks looking to refresh. Hollis, I guess, can you pull up the third question? It's like, what are you planning to do? And Adam and JT, maybe I can turn it over to you guys. Like, when you think about the refresh, or net new and everything, how do you guys think about it? What would you share with members who are going through this? We've got about a quarter of the attendees on this call currently looking at the similar situation that Adam's at. So JT, maybe you've got a little bit more experience with this. You want to kind of take that one first, and then Adam, you can weigh in, and Chad, you can share anything that you've run into with other customers, please.
Sure, Dave. I'll send you my invoice later. So I've been in Mohawk 4 months now. We literally just bought an entirely new VxBlock 1000. The reason you make a choice like that is because, in manufacturing, applications don't evolve as fast as other industries. So if you're still running some monolithic applications, it's probably best to continue the route of a VxBlock. So that was a part of the decision we made. We already have VxRail in our remote sites. My biggest concern with that is, at the time when we purchased VxRail, there was only the 4-node option, I believe. So, after having a conversation, trying to figure out what direction we can go, and hopefully, when the time is to refresh, maybe there's a smaller VxRail available for me to do that. So these are the things that we're taking into account. The edge is very important for us, specifically for plants or remote offices. And we want to offload at the edge as well, so we don't destroy our circuits. So obviously having strong edge equipment is important, and the ability to run maybe some more up-to-date applications, at least from a monitoring and just visibility perspective. That's very important for us. So I know VxRail is a great option, and then the ability to manage it remotely obviously makes it even more favorable. But I want to make sure that we're not buying it from an overkill perspective based off of what is required for each plant. So that's been a big one. We did make PowerStore a purchase in part of this deal as well. So I'm looking forward to see what that can do. That's a new one for me, as well as the team. That's a new one for everybody, probably. I don't even know how many people actually own a power store. So just to see how it operates and being able to provide some feedback to Dell would be super beneficial to us. So, yeah, I mean, it's understanding what your requirements are. And then how do you continuously evolve as the business evolves, or how do you help the business evolve when you can see the return on investment utilizing specific technologies, such as a VX rail?
I think that gives, oh, sorry, Chad, go ahead.
I was going to say, specifically on the edge and manufacturing, please reach out to me or Dave, post this. There is a team in Dell that's specifically now focused on the edge. They're going to be using rail, but they're going to be using other things as well. Now, JT, it just so happens that the first use cases they're looking at are in the manufacturing space and then retail. So, and they're constantly wanting to talk to customers. And in fact, the person running that group was sort of my partner in crime when we started VX Rail. So we work very closely together on this. I know they would enjoy talking to you and anybody else that has an edge use case.
Yeah, I mean, for me,
and that's a great.
Edge it's huge because I'm looking to do a refresh next year for the edge, at least starting a refresh. So obviously having that conversation with them and them understanding the requirements and the expectations from a Mohawk side could benefit both of us. So.
Right. And that's also a great plug for the user group community. If there's folks listening who are retail and manufacturing and this is news to you, we just got the word out, reach out to member services. You've got an advocate with JT, Matt Wakefield's on Oshkosh. He's manufacturing. He's on the board as well. So if you want to speak directly, we can help set that up. And if you want somebody to speak for you, you've got some manufacturing representation on the user group board. Now, Adam, that doesn't put you out in the cold either. You're in a neat space as well. Little different demands.
Yeah. I mean, so we're financial services industry. So our edge use, we're not out in that manufacturing retail space. But again, just kind of more of a point to what JT and Chad have been talking about here is that, reading the room, knowing your environment and knowing what your options are, because there is, no organization's needs are going to be the same. There's going to be some common pieces throughout, but, just sitting here and talking, Chad, it's become really clear that there is a path forward for us that may just be a straight CI refresh. Yeah. It could be a little bit of CI and a little bit of HCI as well, that we've got the flexibility that we can grow out. And it doesn't have to be a one size fits all moving forward. I know for Lincoln, like I said, we still have that I series, that's our big kind of legacy anchor that's probably going to require some form of CI staying in the foreseeable future. But maybe, we can augment that with some HCI and start getting our DevOps team and applications modernized and actually cloud ready, however that works out. So our journey, like I said, 4 years ago, we were sitting with a VNXE and 5 pizza box ESX servers. And that has been a massive improvement across the board for us. Like I said, both, management, uptime, and resiliency. And this has just been a really great journey. And I'm really excited to see what happens for us next year here too. It's just weighing the options and seeing what fits for Lincoln.
Yeah, look, and those of you who are looking at a refresh, you're not alone. So if you look at the way the maintenance contracts are sort of laid out over the last few years, there's a fairly big bubble of users that are in that same boat this year and next year. So there's a lot of work happening on Cheryl Curran's team, leading product management. I know you all know her, and to map out what a refresh looks like, right? How do you get the most value out of transitioning to a 1000 and keeping that infrastructure perpetual?
So Chad, is there terminology like a refresh? Does that mean taking some of what you have currently and reusing it, or is refresh just your blocks are getting to the end of their maintenance cycle, getting long in the tooth? What
there's opportunities.
What are people thinking about?
For some of those, for some of those components that are there, they can be reused. So you look at that slide that I had up before. There are some that can pull forward, some not so much. but you have got a lot more flexibility. I mean, if you look at VxBlock now versus VBlock, you've got a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can do and what a mix of components you can use. And so that's what you would look to do. And then there's also, opportunities to trade in some of the gear as well. So, we'll be putting together all of those tools and options to bring out to you over the course of this year. To one, find out what's the right path for you. Is it CI? Is it HCI? Is it other? It could be other. And if it's CI, what's the most cost-effective way to continue to get those benefits, reduce your cost to operate, and continue in an operating model that you know and love.
That's great. Hey, so Adam, as you're thinking about going into your refresh next year, and JT, as you think about refreshes, would you recommend to folks that this is an opportunity to kind of reassess how your team's orged or structured? Is it the right time, or do you think about it beforehand? Do you think about it afterwards? Weigh in.
I think it's something that, it definitely is worthy of the conversation, because a lot of stuff has a potential to change here as you're moving into a lot of stuff as code. Your traditional areas of focus are going to end up shifting. So you start looking at what other values and skills you could start bringing, that your team could start bringing to the table too. Yeah. Anything for us has just been very traditional networking. We're getting ready to move into the world of NSX and flip everything over to software defined networking. That is a big shift for us. How you start firing up your infrastructure as a code. These are all concepts that 5 years ago I don't think were really on anybody's horizon, at least at Lincoln. This is now changing. These are the conversations that we're having. And JT, I think you might be a little further down the road in this one. How has that played out for you?
So JT 6 months ago had put in significant work for my previous company when it came to shifting the way my team operated, right? So I took a storage team and I turned them on the side, and they learned the whole stack. I took a couple of interns, one that liked to develop and one that was really focused on configuration management. And we created an automation team. So now I come to Mohawk manufacturing, very different. Sort of an old school mindset when you think about IT. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I already have a developer who we're teaching infrastructure, who's well-versed in Python and PowerShell, and now getting more acclimated to Ansible, but also learning VMware, the Converged stack, how everything interacts, because then it allows for him to build scripts and develop code based off the understanding of the infrastructure. Because it's a lot easier to teach a develop infrastructure than it is to teach an infrastructure engineer how to code. And I've already tried both. I've done both ways, and I can tell you right now, it's a lot easier to teach a developer. But yes, you have to evolve and innovate just like the technology is. You can't continue to operate in silos. There's no benefit. Everybody loses because it's way more fun when you get to learn it all and support it all. And then your team feels more, they provide more value, and they feel more valuable as individuals, knowing that they get to help build an entire stack and support it.
It's funny the way you described it. I can remember, Adam, to your point, about 5 years ago, roughly, maybe a little more. I remember we were at EMC's leadership kickoff, and Gartner was in to talk about Mode 1 and Mode 2 IT. If you guys remember those terms, that's sort of the emergence of cloud native. And they said,
I think we have to pay them because you use that term.
I pay them enough. Trust me. You'd have two kinds. You'd have this cloud native sitting alongside, traditional, and they're also very strident in saying, and it's going to be different people. And I know that I didn't completely believe that. So my belief was, yeah, you're going to have this new set of DevOps people that are writing these things. There will be a lot more skinny jeans and a lot more man buns around the office, and that's largely been true, right? But we also thought that the people that are maintaining, operating that IT infrastructure that underlies it, because they don't want to know anything about that, would be some of those traditional IT professionals that we've had before. But I think from your experience, which was kind of surprising to me, that no, it's really easier to take a coder, teach them infrastructure than the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know why, and maybe just because the mindsets are totally different, but for them to understand and learn, they don't technically have to operate it, right? They need to understand it and how it works for the business, but they don't technically need to operate it. So for a developer, it's a lot easier for me to teach that than me go to my infrastructure engineer or my storage guy who's been doing storage for 15 years and say, hey, by the way, I need you to learn PowerShell, Ansible, and Python. He would look at me like I was a psychopath. So it's just been easier. Now, and I'm not saying that they can't adapt and they can't take some scripts and edit it to their, to their environment or to allow them to be more efficient. But why not give them a person to do it and allow them to be more innovative and understanding what's the next steps for us, right? We don't do R&D like we should because we're so focused in operations. But now that we have automation, we can offset some of that. And now I can take some of these employees and apply that mindset. Now they get to be more innovative, more like, okay, in 5 years, this is where we want to be. How do we get there?
So JT, would for the members listening, if they fall into that bucket of they grew up in infrastructure, what are some recommendations you have for them to make it so that they're not more of the stereotypical what you've run into, where it's hard for them to get to the DevOps side? Like
right.
what suggestions? How would?
Yeah. So what I used to tell my team in my previous company and what I tell them my new team is, if you've ever seen the movie Jurassic World, what happens at the end? All the dinosaurs are extinct, or they're gone, right? You don't want to become a dinosaur in IT. So to not become one, you have to be open-minded and learning new technology and new ways to do your job. Because if you don't, you become a dinosaur, and then you'll be in the museum. So I don't want to put you in the museum. I want you to evolve. My job is to help grow you as an individual, and you play a big important part in how we get better as a company. So in order to do that, you have to train them. You have to, the training is such a interesting conversation because it's a cost, it's an expense, right? But it's actually, it's not an expense because down the road, you're gonna need that experience, or you're gonna go have to hire it, and you're probably gonna spend even more money because of the level of expertise that the people you will have to bring in will have. So it's easier for me to grow it in-house. Not saying that I'm not going to pay my people, because absolutely get paid, but to bring in talent outside when they know that it's a rare talent, like a DevOps engineer, although, everybody believes there's a bunch of them, there's still a small subset of what a real DevOps engineer actually is in technology. You will not find a lot of them and then be really good. So, it's very important that if you have one or you can create one, you keep them and you keep them happy.
And do it now. My son is a freshman in high school and they're already learning Python. So this kid's going to be coming out of high school and knock on wood, college, and be pretty well versed in this. And the languages are much easier, they're much more approachable. This is not like learning C++ was.
Right, which was terrible. So yeah.
So that's great stuff, Adam. I'll give you a second to weigh in, but also we do have a question in the chat. So if you don't have anything, why don't you read over the question in the chat, or why don't you reply and then read over the question in the chat?
All right. So let's see what we got here. I am new to this, and a lot of references to VMware. Are any references or plans to make this work with Hyper-V, or is that an option? And I don't know.
That's a question.
So with that, well, yeah, it is, but that kind of takes us back to earlier we were talking about, for the folks who are new to this, Adam, what are some basic questions? You're new to the board. You're not new to the journey, but you were looking out for what the new members might need to get back to basics. So you had some questions with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave. And, Chad, JT, I'll throw this at your direction here, but, for the benefit of everybody here, I guess at a really high level here, what is CI? What is HCI? And, what would some of the, I know we kind of talk about some of the use cases, in the room, but, at a real high level, just what are some of the big differences between the two? Any obvious reasons why somebody would go with one or the other in a perfect world?
Yeah. Well, I think that HCI was sort of the logical next step of CI. So if I look at what we've done, and BCE was really the pioneer in this space, this partnership between VMware, EMC, and Cisco. You're taking all the components of compute, virtualization, storage, and some level of networking and/or SAN, and getting it to operate like a system, right? All in the same rack, common management model, common tool set, and then the definition of all of the versions of each of the components to, guarantee that they work together, right? So that systemness approach to the converged infrastructure. Same components, but it would change your business when you adopted it, because you stop thinking about the people that are looking after compute versus storage versus networking. They really had to work together, right? You needed a virtual administrator, not separate people who looked at these. And candidly, people who adopted that operating model tended to be really happy vBlock customers. People who didn't, not so much, right? That was the key. But fast forward to sort of the rise of hyperconverged infrastructure. There's really the big enabling factor for that was software-defined storage, right? That was sort of the last thing that was required for this to happen. Now, in that model, you're running compute, virtualization, storage, maybe software-defined networking, but all the automation management in an x86 server. And it's usually clustered, and it's usually scale out. So that meant that you could start small and you could expand. And effectively on, I hate to say, commodity x86 servers, but relative to storage arrays, x86 is somewhat commoditized. So that gave you the ability to start to build out in a much more simple way. And much of the logic and capabilities that would have been built into the definition and the procedure for upgrading and lifecycle managing a converged infrastructure system would now inherently be in the hyperconverged platform itself, right? So all the automation for doing setup, all the automation for upgrading storage, virtualization, firmware, what have you, GPUs, NICs, et cetera, all built into the platform itself. So it was simple. It's simple, it's faster to deploy, and then the operating advantage that a form factor like that would have means that you could build it out in the core in very large use cases, but you could also put it out in the edge with very small use cases, low number of nodes. But the automation that you write against it, the processes that you put around it, are exactly the same, whether it's 2,000 nodes in the core or 2,000 nodes in 1,000 locations in your enterprise. So that's the key there. So it can go in a lot more places. Now, why would you continue to do CI? Well, you may not want to change the operating procedure that you have. As Adam mentioned, you may have workloads that really need to be on that array, or you simply have a preference. But at this point, if you look at things like the availability, reliability of, and then many times the performance, pretty much the same across each of the platforms. So then it gets down to operating model.
Yeah,
Sorry, JT, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I give a very basic analogy when I talk to executives about the difference. I say, to me, CI is like a Jeep Wrangler, and HCI is like a Tesla sedan, right? One is a heavy lifter. It's used to carry heavy workloads, right? That's what you're going to put on a CI, a Jeep Wrangler. And then when you think of a Tesla, you're going to put smaller workloads, but they're more efficient and automated.
Yep.
So that's a great analogy when you want to break it down to an executive if they ever ask you that question. And it's very basic, right? I don't want you to go all the way into details, but it's to give them an understanding of the differences and why you would pick one over the other.
No, I mean, that's a great comparison. Good exec speak too, JT. Get it right there.
Big
Hey,
colorful
man,
pictures.
Good picture. So before we wrap up, there was the question about Hyper-V, and thanks, Matt, for answering that in the chat. That's great. But let's talk a little bit more about, what if people, well, JT, are you a VMware only shop now? Were you always a VMware only shop? Adam, are you sitting there too as a VMware only shop? Because I know historically there were plenty of shops that mixed workloads, and in the early days, bare metal was an option on a block, and that bare metal option allowed you to put in different hypervisors if you wanted to. So, Adam and JT, you guys were both nodding that you're VMware only shops, but weigh in on that. And then Chad, can you just walk us through what other options are out there and how people can, because this is the Converged user group, so it's CI and HCI. It doesn't mean that you just have to have VMware as your hypervisor.
Right. Go ahead, Adam. I'll let you go first.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that we have been VM customers going back, I think, since the 4X days. When I had mentioned our previous infrastructure was just a bunch of Dell PowerEdge pizza boxes. Going back to then, bare metal, VMware, we've been in there pretty heavy since, right up through that into the block, and we really have not looked back.
Yeah, so same, Dave. Obviously, huge VMware shop. When I think of Hyper-V, I think of cloud. So if I'm going to utilize Hyper-V, I want to have the flexibility to move workloads between on-prem and cloud if I'm going to use Hyper-V, which is a great segue to chat.
Absolutely, we've got a few choices in the portfolio that would support that. One that Matt pointed out is HyperFlex. Is something that you could support multiple hypervisors or even bare metal on that. However, for specifically Microsoft, we've got Azure Stack Hub. We've got Azure Stack. About to have Azure Stack HCI. I don't know if I just pre-announced something. And then effectively just the most basic, which is Windows Server with storage spaces. I believe there's a new name for that. So those products are also part of the portfolio, or just became part of my portfolio, or I would have spoken about them more eloquently. But we do have a pretty robust Microsoft offer.
And then Chad, isn't there also an option to put some bare metal into the 1000?
Absolutely. Yep. Been able to do that on vBlock. We can continue to do that.
Yep. So yeah, very cool. Folks, let's see here. Okay, just scanning the chat. We're coming up to quarter past the hour, so it's time to start wrapping up. I was thinking of Sequoia with winter tires. Someone must be in the Northeast. Thanks, John. JT, Adam, any final thoughts? Anything to lay out to the members as you're thinking about this? JT, I always bounce it back to the personnel thing. I will put a plug out there. If you guys haven't tried it, we were talking Tanzu back in November, and then in January, Tanzu on VxRail. I checked out Kube Academy. That if you, JT, for your folks, Adam, for your folks, if they haven't checked that out, it's a fun way to learn what's going on out there about Kubernetes. So decent resource. I think it's a great resource and it's free. Chad, have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. We did, although if you want to play with it in real time as well, Rail now has Kubernetes Tanzu Basic Edition. Right, so if you want to get Kubernetes dial tone into the hands of your DevOps people, quickly, and it's still a VMware environment, it's going to be compatible with the environment you have. It's a really good place to start. And kind of going back to one of the things that Adam and JT were both saying about being a predominantly or 100% VMware shop, and that's likely the path of moving to cloud native is Tanzu, because you're going to have a lot of the same tools, deal with a lot of the same support mechanisms, et cetera, to get into a container world. The question will be, if somebody's building container from the ground up, will it be VMware or not, or OpenShift or other, or Azure? Jury's out, so we'll see.
Yeah, I would love to get into Kubernetes more, Dave, but I'm not really there yet, obviously, in manufacturing. So
Yeah.
That's working directly with vendors that support some of the things that we do, because obviously we're a big cot shop. So to get away from it would require us to work directly with those companies to kind of build a model to support containerization.
One of the things that the Edge team is doing is working with some of the vendors in the manufacturing vertical on specifically their software.
Tell them to call me. We need to talk ASAP.
We'll do.
I got you. All right, we'll get that squared away. Adam, final thoughts, man. Thank you for co-hosting, being a special guest.
Absolutely.
Great to have you here. Good to see you.
Hey, great to be here, and thank you for having me here. I think the one thing I'm hearing is that there's a lot of options, but the importance of knowing your environment, knowing your staff, and just being able to adapt, stay modern. I think we've all seen some various tracks. You don't modernize, like you said, JT, you become the dinosaurs at the end of Jurassic World. So in whatever context that is, just be able to adapt and stay modern. I think that will always bring benefits. And you got a great team here. We got a great, group of folks here that are all willing to help out and drive everybody's, refreshes and, new directions in life here. So, adapt.
Awesome.
That is my word.
All right. Fantastic. Chad, thank you. Any final thoughts for folks before we wrap up? Did that get to Chad? Am I muted?
No,
he can't.
No, yeah, guys, it's very good conversation as usual. Sorry. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed this.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much. Folks, I will plug again, reach out to member services at convergeusergroup.com. If you have any questions, we can get those to Chad and his team. If you have questions for JT and Adam, we can get those routed there as well. Thank you again for your time. JT, it's great to have you back.
Great to be back.
Glad to have my special co-host back from assignment now that we can let everybody know that you're at Mohawk. So congratulations. It's really cool.
Sure.
Hollis has put the survey into SurveyMonkey in the chat. We'd love it if you guys could let us know how you like this, what you want to hear from in the future, and how we can improve. I've got my thinking cap on. I'll be thinking about what we did today and how we can keep going forward. Once again, stay safe. Looking forward to seeing everybody in person sometime soon. I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But until then, we will do our best to bring you more community opportunities, more community hours each month, and some special stuff in between. So please stay connected, stay safe, and stay thinking. Hollis, back to you.
Thanks, David, and thank you everyone so much for joining us. It was a great discussion today, and I hope that you all really found it beneficial. Again, as David mentioned, please complete our survey. You will be entered in for a chance to win a prize. Also, the recording of this community hour will be available within the next day on our resources page on the convergeusergroup.com website, as well as a list of upcoming community hours, which you can go ahead and register for. But again, thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And special thank you to our sponsors, Dell Technologies and VMware. Thank you, David, for the reminder.
Thank you. I forgot that, but we couldn't do it without them. So thank you for your support. Thanks all. We appreciate your time, and have a great February. Thanks again, Adam, JT, Chad, Hollis.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks all.
Thank you.